This screencast is looking at the ventilatory system 2.1.6 and 2.1.7. I'm going to start off with 2.1.7, which is looking at the process of gaseous exchange at the alveoli rather than looking at haemoglobin, because that occurs first. So this diagram here is a little bit different to the way that we would normally see it. This is split oxygen up and carbon dioxide up as far as the process of diffusion. The only difference with the oxygen pressure here is that our textbook says that that's 106 millimeters mercury. This is saying it's 100. So anyway, we breathe in air into our alveoli. It has a much higher concentration of oxygen than carbon dioxide. So when we breathe in, we have approximately 100 millimeters of mercury. That's the pressure of oxygen in the alveoli, and approximately 40 millimeters mercury pressure carbon dioxide in the alveoli. So that's when we breathe in. As the blood is moving past our alveoli, the pressure of oxygen at that point in time is low. It's approximately 40 millimeters of mercury. Now, because of the pressure gradient being higher in the alveoli and less in the blood, the direction of movement is going to be that the oxygen diffuses across those cell walls, so the alveoli wall, the capillary wall, and into and attaching to our haemoglobin. So as our blood moves towards our working muscles, where oxygen is required to produce energy, or adenosine triphosphate that we look at later on, we have a high pressure of oxygen in the blood, again 100 millimeters mercury, and we have a low pressure of oxygen in the tissue. So the direction of movement is from the blood into the tissue for oxygen. Here we are then left with a low pressure of oxygen in the blood, returns up to the alveoli, where oxygen is then diffused into the blood again. With carbon dioxide, we have a low pressure of carbon dioxide in the oxygenated blood. It moves towards the tissues. In the tissues, because carbon dioxide, CO2 and H2O, they're byproducts of aerobic energy production. Because carbon dioxide is produced, we end up with an increased amount of carbon dioxide, increased concentration, meaning an increased pressure. Therefore, 46 being greater than 40, the movement of carbon dioxide is from the tissue into the blood, and that carbon dioxide then moves in the blood towards the alveoli. Here, high concentration or high pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood, a lower pressure in the alveoli, hence the movement of oxygen from the blood, carbon dioxide from the blood into the alveoli, where we can breathe it out. Next on the list to look at is 2.1.6, outline the role of haemoglobin in oxygen transportation. Now, looking at the teacher's notes here, it indicates that most, being 98.5% 0.5% of oxygen in the blood is transported by haemoglobin as oxyhemoglobin within red blood cells. So hemoglobin's HB. If we're looking at oxyhemoglobin O2 HB, it's essentially exactly the same thing except with oxygen attached to it. So where you see oxyhemoglobin, we have hemoglobin with oxygen attached, and quite often you'll just see hemoglobin on its own. When we talk about hemoglobin, we tend to assume that oxygen is attached to it. So the role of hemoglobin to transport oxygen. But yes, when oxygen is attached, it really should be referred to as oxyhemoglobin. The other 1.5 is diffused into and travels or is transported within the plasma, but it's a pretty inefficient way of doing it. So this is our hemoglobin. So we have our red blood cell, then we have our hemoglobin. As part of that, we have a helix, and we have within that helix, which has 4 parts to it, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 ion sites, which our oxygen, 2 here being O2, they attach to the ion parts. Slightly different way of looking at the helix, where we've got our 4 parts. We have our oxygen molecules here that are attached again to the ion